The blue light from multiple monitors cast a harsh glow across Brian Cordova's office as the clock struck midnight. His coffee, the third of the evening, sat untouched beside his keyboard. Most CEOs would have delegated this level of security analysis, but Brian built Sentinel cybersecurity solutions from the ground up by staying hands-on. An anomaly in the Durham development's logs caught his attention like a misplaced pixel in a perfect image. His eyes narrowed as he leaned forward, his fingers dancing across the keyboard while he dug deeper into the data. Early morning logins from the Caymans appeared as he pulled up the IP trace. The credentials belonged to Robbie Durham, his supposed best friend since college. Initially, Brian almost dismissed it. Robbie was known for frequent business trips and odd working hours, but something about the pattern set off warning bells in Brian's mind. The sound of footsteps in the otherwise empty office made him look up. Antoine Monroe, his head of security and former NSA analyst, stood in the doorway with a tablet in hand. His carefully neutral expression meant trouble was coming. "Sir, we have completed the sweep of Mrs. Cordova's devices you requested," Antoine said in a measured tone. "You might want to take a look at this." Brian gestured to the chair across from his desk and replied, "Show me." Antoine pulled up a series of maps and timestamps on his tablet. "We've identified a pattern in Mrs. Cordova's movements. Every Wednesday and Sunday, her phone connects to a Wi-Fi network named Durham Guest House." He slid the tablet across the desk. "The address isn't Robbie's main residence." Brian's jaw tightened as he studied the location. The Archer, one of downtown's most exclusive apartment complexes. "How long?" he asked. 6 months, we can confirm," Antoine replied. "But there's more. Remember those fertility clinic appointments Mrs. Cordova mentioned?" Brian nodded, his voice steady despite the growing tension. Antoine pulled up another set of data. Her phone never once connected to the clinic's network, but on those exact dates and times. He let the sentence hang and showed Brian another map, pinning the same luxury apartment building. Brian leaned back, his expression hardening. "Pull everything you can on that apartment. Property records, utilities, surveillance footage. I want to know who owns it, and who's been there." "We're already on it," Antoine confirmed. "We've also noticed interesting patterns in the Durham development's network traffic. Their financial servers were receiving encrypted data bursts during those same windows. Expand the surveillance net," Brian ordered, turning back to his monitors. "Full spectrum digital and physical. I want eyes and ears on both of them." Antoine paused at the door. "Sir, if this goes where I think it's going, it could get messy. Durham Developments is our biggest client." Brian's reflection in the dark monitor showed no emotion. "Then we better have ironclad evidence." He pulled up another window and added, "And Antoine, keep this between us for now." "Understood." Antoine nodded as he left, closing the door silently behind him. Alone again, Brian pulled up his personal files. Photos from better days filled the screen: his wedding day, family gatherings, and fishing trips with Robbie. His cursor hovered over a recent image: Carissa at his parents' anniversary dinner, sitting suspiciously close to Robbie, both laughing at a private joke. He opened his secure messaging system and typed a brief message to Nadia Moyer, a forensic accountant he'd worked with before. "Need a discrete analysis. Sending files now. Priority. Alpha." The pieces were starting to form a pattern, and Brian Cordova had built his career on recognizing patterns. As he began compiling the data, a plan took shape in his mind. They thought they were being clever, but they forgot one crucial detail in the digital age: every action leaves a trace. Brian's next week brought a flood of revelations, each more damning than the last. He sat in his private conference room surrounded by digital and paper trails that painted an increasingly disturbing picture. Nadia Moyer's preliminary report lay open on his tablet. "These returns are textbook red flags," Nadia explained over a secure video call, her sharp features highlighted by her office lighting. "I've analyzed similar schemes before, but rarely this sophisticated." She shared her screen and pointed to specific transactions. See these construction projects. Half of them exist only on paper, and the other half are dramatically overvalued. Brian scrolled through the data, his technical background helping him grasp the implications quickly. My father put his entire retirement fund into this. Harold Cordova's investment appears to be a cornerstone. Nadia confirmed. His name and reputation attracted many secondary investors. The monthly returns are all smoke and mirrors. A classic Ponzi structure. The door opened, and Antoine entered with a fresh stack of reports. Sir, you need to see this. We've been monitoring your parents' communications as requested. Brian motioned for him to continue while keeping Nadia on the call. Antoine pulled up several email threads on the main screen. Your mother has been particularly active in social circles. She's been promoting Durham developments to everyone in her country club network. But it's the private messages that are interesting. He highlighted several exchanges. She consistently compares you to Robbie, not in a favorable light. One email chain caught my attention. Your mother wrote, Robbie understands the value of real business. Unlike some people who waste their time with computers, we should have encouraged you to join Durham Developments instead of starting that security company. There's more, Antoine continued hesitantly. Your parents have been pushing several of their friends to invest their retirement funds with Durham. Your mother specifically uses phrases like, it's what Brian would do if he understood real business. Nadia interjected, that explains some of the investment patterns I'm seeing. The social pressure from respected community members created a perfect environment for the scheme to flourish. Brian's phone buzzed with another message from his mother. Don't forget dinner this Sunday. Chris has already confirmed she'll be there. She never misses family gatherings. Before he could respond, Antoine's tablet lit up with an alert. Sir, we just got a hit on the Durham guest house surveillance. He pulled up the footage on the main screen. The high-definition camera caught Carissa entering the building. Shortly after, Robbie Durham walked through the same door, glancing over his shoulder before entering. Antoine continued. Her exit was recorded early the following morning. She claimed she was at her sister's house that night, but her sister was in Miami the entire week. We have her credit card records and flight details. Nadia spoke up from the video call. Mr. Cordova, given what we're uncovering, I recommend expanding the financial investigation. Do it, Brian cut her off. Standing up, he declared, I want every transaction, every account, every property tied to Durham Developments audited. Go back 5 years. He turned to Antoine. Keep the surveillance running. I want to know every move they make. After both Nadia and Antoine left, Brian remained in the conference room, studying a freeze frame of Carissa and Roddy entering the apartment building. His wedding ring caught the light as he reached for his phone and pulled up a contact he had hoped never to need. Magdalena Banks, federal prosecutor. The next phase of Brian's plan required perfect timing and even better technology. He stood in his bedroom supervising as his trusted technical team installed the latest surveillance equipment under the guise of a home security upgrade. The cameras are virtually undetectable, explained Jordan, his lead technician. 4K resolution, infrared capability, and a direct feed to our secure servers, Jordan continued, pointing to various spots in the room. We've got complete coverage, including audio. Carissa walked in, barely glancing up from her phone. Are you still playing with your gadgets, honey? She teased. Her tone dripped with condescension. Robbie says most security systems are just expensive toys. Brian replied smoothly. You can never be too careful. Noticing her tense reaction when Robbie's name was mentioned, he added, whatever makes you feel better. She smiled, but the expression did not reach her eyes. I'm going to my afternoon appointment. Don't wait up. It might run late. As soon as she left, Jordan pulled up the system interface on his tablet. We're live, sir. Every camera is functioning perfectly. He hesitated. Are you sure you want to see everything these might capture? Sometimes the truth hurts, Jordan, but lies kill, Brian replied impassively. He checked his watch. How long until the phone tap is active? Already done, Jordan confirmed. We're recording all calls and messages with backup copies stored automatically. That evening, while Carissa was supposedly at her appointment, her phone call with her sister came through crystal clear. You won't believe what Harold and Margaret said. Carissa's voice bubbled with excitement. They're going to sign over their vacation house as a wedding gift once I leave. They think their precious Robbie deserves a proper family home. Her sister laughed over the speaker. How are you going to break it to Brian? Carissa scoffed. He's so wrapped up in his computers, he probably won't notice I'm expecting until it's too late. Brian listened to the entire conversation, his face a mask of controlled anger. The next day, he set the final trap. I got a late meeting tomorrow night, he mentioned casually over breakfast. Some potential new clients from Europe, different time zones, and all that. Carissa barely managed a smile behind her coffee cup. Don't worry about me. I'll find something to keep me busy, she replied. The cameras captured everything that night. Carissa's phone call to Robbie revealing they were meeting at the guest house while they thought Brian was away. Every incriminating word was recorded. It was the following evening when Brian confronted her with initial evidence that the trap had snapped shut. He laid out surveillance stills on the kitchen counter. Care to explain these photos? You and Robbie seem very friendly at his guest house. Instead of denying it, Carissa's facade cracked. Years of pretense have fallen away. She snapped. You want the truth? Fine. Robbie gave me everything you couldn't. A future, actual warmth instead of cold logic and computer screens. And my parents. Brian's voice remained steady even as hidden cameras recorded every word. They love him more than they ever loved you. She laughed harshly. Why do you think they pushed everyone to invest with him? They're hosting our engagement party next week. Don't bother calling them. They've already chosen sides. What Carissa failed to notice was the small device on their bedside table, a smart home hub streaming her entire confession to multiple secure servers and to one recipient. Magdalena Banks, Robbie's wife, and a federal prosecutor specializing in financial crimes. The trap was complete, but it was only the beginning. As Brian watched Carissa storm out of the house, he knew the real battle was just starting. He pulled out his phone and sent a single text to Antoine. Initiate Protocol Judas. The pieces were in place. Now the game would begin. The FBI's white-collar crime division occupied the 12th floor of a nondescript federal building. Brian Cordova sat in a secure conference room, the morning sun casting long shadows across the polished table. Across from him, Magdalena Banks adjusted her position, her 7-month pregnancy visible beneath her expertly tailored Navy suit. Agent Erica Donovan, head of financial crimes, completed their trio as her sharp eyes scanned the documents spread before them. Your surveillance data confirm what I've suspected for months, Magdalena said, spreading additional files across the table. Her voice carried the precise tone of a seasoned prosecutor. Durham Developments isn't just running a simple fraud, it's the front for something much bigger. Brian nodded and pulled out his laptop. 3 years ago, Robbie convinced my father to invest his entire pension. Dad then leveraged his position as a retired judge to bring in his country club friends. He pulled up a spreadsheet. The total exposure is approximately $50 million in retirement funds. Agent Donovan leaned forward grimly. Those recordings you provided, they're exactly what we needed, but we've uncovered something that makes this case a top priority. She slid a classified folder across the table. Your friend Robbie has connections we didn't expect. Magdalena picked up the thread. Last month, I found documents linking Durham Developments to shell companies in Dubai. The timing is crucial. Robbie is planning to flee with the money after the engagement party. He already has a private jet on standby. Of course he does, Brian said sharply. He always had a flair for the dramatic. Agent Donovan pulled up surveillance photos on the main screen. We've been tracking his movements, weekly meetings with known international fraud syndicates. Your company's security systems even caught what our standard surveillance missed. The irony isn't lost on me, Brian remarked. He's been using my own security infrastructure to conduct his illegal operations. Magdalena shifted uncomfortably, one hand resting on her belly. There's something else you need to know, Brian. The pregnancy. She paused. Robbie's been telling everyone he's the father, but I found medical records suggesting otherwise. Classic misdirection. Agent Donovan interjected. Keep everyone focused on the financial crime while the personal drama distracts them. Brian's expression remained neutral, but his eyes hardened. What's our next move? He asked. We need more evidence. The offshore accounts, the fake construction projects. Your surveillance gave us probable cause, but we need a concrete money trail. I can help with that, Brian said as he opened another file on his laptop. My team has been tracking every digital footprint. What we found isn't just about the money. They are using construction projects to launder funds from multiple sources. Magdalena leaned forward, her prosecutorial instincts kicking in. This is exactly what we need, but we must move carefully. If Robbie suspects we're onto him, he won't, Brian replied. He's too convinced of his own brilliance. That's always been his weakness. Agent Donovan nodded approvingly. We'll need to coordinate our moves carefully. Your parents' involvement complicates things. My parents made their choice, Brian said icily. They chose their side when they decided to back him over their own son. Magdalena added, pulling out a final document. The engagement party isn't just a celebration. It's a gathering of every major player in their scheme. One location, all targets together. Perfect timing. Agent Donovan smiled grimly. We'll need someone on the inside. Someone they won't suspect. Brian's laptop pinged with an incoming message. He read it quickly, his expression darkening. That won't be a problem. My mother just sent an invitation. Apparently, they want me there to handle things gracefully. Can you maintain cover? Agent Donovan asked directly. Personal involvement can complicate operations. Brian's laugh held no humor. Agent Donovan, I've been undercover ever since I first spotted those login anomalies. They have no idea who they're dealing with. Magdalena touched her belly again, her expression hardening. Just remember, when this all goes down, Robbie is going to learn what it means to betray the wrong people. Agreed, Brian said as he stood and gathered his materials. But first, we need to let them think they're winning. The more confident they get, the more mistakes they'll make. Agent Donovan concluded, we'll set up secure communications channels. Everything goes through this office only. As the meeting ended, Magdalena caught Brian's arm and said quietly, Thank you for being the one who finally caught him. Sometimes the best revenge is letting people destroy themselves, Brian replied simply, his mind already moving to the next phase of their plan. Jordan Acevedo's workspace in Sentinel Cybersecurity's secure basement lab resembled a digital war room. Multiple screens displayed data streams, financial records, and surveillance feeds. The young security analyst's fingers flew across his keyboard as Brian entered. Sir, you need to see this, Jordan said without looking up. Remember those encrypted emails we intercepted? I finally cracked them. Jordan pulled up a series of documents on the main screen. Durham Developments isn't just running a Ponzi scheme. They're laundering money for an international real estate fraud ring. Brian leaned closer to study the complex web of transactions and said, Show me. See these legitimate construction projects. Jordan explained, highlighting several developments. They're real, but they're just cover. The company has been inflating costs, faking invoices, and using the projects to clean millions in ill-gotten funds. He hesitated before adding, and my father's role. His reputation as a retired judge gave the entire operation legitimacy. Look at these documents, Jordan said, showing property deals with my father's signature on dozens of records. He had to know what he was signing. There's more, he said, switching screens. We accessed Carissa's private cloud storage. You might want to sit down for this. The screen filled with documents, private school applications, trust fund setups, property transfers, all listing Robbie Durham as the father with substantial contributions from Harold and Margaret Cordova. They were planning this for months, Jordan explained while pulling up financial records. Credit card statements show shopping sprees, spa treatments, even a new card charged to your father's accounts. They were setting up their new life while systematically draining your parents' resources. Agent Donovan's voice came from the doorway. And using those same accounts to launder more money. She nodded to Brian. Your team's work is impressive. We've been trying to crack this ring for years. Jordan pulled up more data. The construction projects were just phase 1. We found evidence of similar operations in Dubai, Singapore, and the Caymans. They're using real estate developments to move money across borders. Agent Donovan noted, classic technique, but the scale is unprecedented. Your father's reputation opened doors that would normally be sealed. Brian studied the financial flows. They're getting sloppy. The closer we get to the engagement party, the more corners they're cutting. Jordan interrupted. You should see what Chris has been up to. He played a recent surveillance clip from their home system. On screen, Chris spoke on her phone. Everything's ready. Once the engagements are announced, we'll transfer the remaining funds. Brian's parents were so eager to help their new son-in-law. They'd already signed the papers. Timestamp. Brian asked. Yesterday afternoon, right after she met your mother at the country club. Agent Donovan noted, her tablet in hand. This ties directly to the international accounts we've been monitoring. The timing matches perfectly. Jordan hesitated. There's one more thing about the pregnancy. Brian held up a hand. Save it. Focus on the money trail. Personal drama is exactly what they want us distracted by. Smart. Agent Donovan approved. Keep emotions out of it. That's why they never saw you coming, Brian added coolly. They thought you'd be too hurt to think clearly. A notification popped up on Jordan's screen. New activity on the Durham Guest House Network. They're meeting right now. Brian checked his watch. Right on schedule. Agent Donovan, I believe it's time for phase 2. FBI teams are in position, he said. She confirmed. We're ready when you are. Jordan, maintain surveillance. I want every conversation, every file transfer, every digital breadcrumb tracked and logged. Jordan asked, what about your mother's invitation to dinner? Brian's smile was cold. Oh, I'll be there. They want to see their son handle things gracefully. I'll give them a performance they'll never forget. As they left the lab, Agent Donovan spoke quietly. You're taking this remarkably well. In my business, Brian replied, the biggest threat isn't the obvious attack. It's the one you never see coming. They thought they were the predators. They never realized they were the prey. 2 days before the engagement party, Brian's mother's house stood as an elegant monument to old money and social status. Brian parked his car in the circular driveway while an FBI surveillance van was discreetly positioned down the street. The wire he wore was state-of-the-art, developed by his own company. Margaret Cordova waited in her formal dining room, perfectly coiffed and radiating disapproval. The antique table between them held divorce papers, their crisp white pages stark against the dark wood. You need to sign these, she said, pushing the documents toward him. It's a statement supporting Carissa's divorce petition. We can't have a scandal affecting Robbie's company. Brian picked up the papers, noting his mother's signature already in place as a witness. Interesting timing, he murmured. Don't be difficult, Brian, Margaret said in a condescending tone. This is for the best. Carissa deserves happiness. With my best friend. With someone who understands the value of real business. Carissa had once said, dismissing Brian's internet security work. Someone who built something tangible. Brian set the papers down carefully. Why, Mother? Why choose him over your own son? Because he's everything you're not, Margaret replied, her facade cracking as years of disappointment poured out. When he marries Carissa, we'll finally have the son we always wanted, someone who can carry on the family legacy properly. The legacy of fraud. Margaret's face paled slightly before she recovered. I don't know what you're talking about. Robbie's business is completely legitimate. Your father's investments have shown excellent returns." "Yes, those impressive returns," Brian said steadily. "But tell me, does Dad know where the money really comes from?" "Your father understands business," Margaret said, chin lifting. "Unlike you, he recognizes real opportunity when he sees it." "Real opportunity," Brian echoed, "like the shell companies in Dubai or the fake construction projects." For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Margaret's eyes. "You're just jealous of Robbie's success." "Carissa's pregnancy," Brian continued coolly. "Have you already picked out nursery furniture for your new grandchild?" "As a matter of fact, we have," Margaret replied. "The baby deserves the best, and Robbie can provide that." Brian stood slowly. "One last question, Mother. When did you stop loving your son?" "Don't be dramatic," she waved dismissively. "This isn't about love. It's about securing our family's future. Once you sign these papers, everything will be perfect." "Perfect," Brian repeated. "Just like the perfect family you always wanted." "Exactly. Now, sign the papers. The engagement party is in 2 days, and we need everything arranged." Brian picked up his pen, then paused. "You know what's interesting about betrayal, Mother? It never comes from your enemies." He signed the papers with a flourish, watching his mother's triumphant smile. What she didn't know was that Harold had already cracked under FBI pressure. He was meeting with federal agents and had agreed to wear a wire at the engagement party. "Everything is arranged just as you wanted," he said. Margaret gathered the papers, unaware of the cold satisfaction in her son's eyes. "You've done the right thing, Brian. You'll see that eventually." As he left the house, Agent Donovan's voice came through his earpiece. "Got it all. Clean recording." Brian started his car and watched his mother through the window as she made a call, undoubtedly to Robbie or Carissa. "How's the other operation going?" his earpiece asked. "Your father's cooperation is complete. He's given us all the documents, recordings, and account numbers. The case is airtight." Brian pulled away from the house. "Let them have their moment of triumph. The engagement party is going to be quite memorable." In his rearview mirror, he could see his mother still on the phone, probably sharing news of her victory. She had no idea she had just helped seal their fate. The betrayal was complete, and now it was time for justice. The River Oaks Country Club's grand ballroom sparkled with excess. Crystal chandeliers fractured light across faces fattened by stolen dreams. Brian sat in the FBI Mobile Command Center, surrounded by monitors showing every angle of the unfolding farce. His team had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Cameras and microphones had been planted throughout the venue with precision that would impress any intelligence agency. Carissa floated through the crowd in a designer dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her baby bump was prominently displayed, a calculated prop in her performance. Beside her, Robbie Durham worked the room with the practiced charm of a seasoned con artist, his hand possessively placed on her lower back. All teams were in position when Agent Donovan's voice came through his earpiece. "The Dubai office confirms they're ready. Interpol teams are on standby in the Caymans." Jordan reported from another screen. "We've identified representatives from 3 different international crime syndicates in attendance. They're here to collect." Brian muttered, "Not today," while watching his father fidget nervously near the stage. Harold's wire transmitted snippets of damning conversations as he moved through the crowd. Tuan's voice cut in. "Sir, we've detected attempts to access the private airfield systems. They're trying to prep the jet early." "Let them try." Brian smiled coldly. "Our back door in their flight systems is holding. That plane isn't going anywhere." The club's Wi-Fi network lit up as guests arrived, each connection feeding into Sentinel's monitoring systems, a surveillance net Brian himself had designed. Multiple targets were moving into position, and Agent Donovan updated. "Margaret Cordova is gathering the country club board members. They seem to be discussing the next phase of investments." Brian watched his mother work the room, her social grace masking the desperation beneath. She had always been good at appearances, but tonight those would be stripped away forever. An FBI text arrived. "Mr. Cordova, we're detecting encrypted transmissions to offshore accounts. They're trying to move money out ahead of schedule." "Right on time," Brian nodded. "Activate Protocol Echo across the globe." Carefully planted algorithms sprang to life. Every transaction attempted by Durham Developments or its shell companies was now being diverted into FBI-controlled honeypot accounts, creating an unbreakable chain of evidence. At one point, Harold Cordova approached the microphone, his hands trembling slightly. Robbie raised his champagne glass, expecting another glowing endorsement from his future father-in-law. Carissa's smug smile grew wider until Brian commanded, "Execute." The operation unfolded with mechanical precision. Every Durham Developments account worldwide froze simultaneously. Emergency alerts flooded the phones of board members and executives. Before Robbie could finish his opening sentence, Harold stepped forward. "I have a confession to make." His voice cracked but held firm as he produced index cards detailing Durham Developments' fraud and everything they had done. Carissa's triumphant expression crumbled. She grabbed Robbie's arm and whispered urgently. Brian could read her lips. "They know. We have to go now." But it was too late. The club's main screens flickered to life, displaying damning evidence: fake construction projects, money transfers, and offshore accounts. Jordan had compiled the presentation himself, ensuring maximum impact. Robbie shoved Carissa aside and bolted for the nearest exit, only to be stopped by Agent Donovan and her team. "Robert Durham," she announced clearly, ensuring nearby phones captured every word. "You are under arrest for fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy against the United States." Carissa ran for the private entrance, stumbling in her expensive heels. Her face contorted with rage when she found the door locked. "This is impossible. The jet is waiting. We had everything planned," she screamed. Brian's voice came from behind her, calm and measured. "Did you really think I'd let you steal my money and run?" "You," she spat, years of pretense falling away. "You pathetic excuse for a husband. We had it all figured out. Your parents always knew who the better man was." "Better at fraud, perhaps," Brian replied calmly as FBI agents approached. "But you forgot one crucial detail. You bragged about your plans in a house I designed, on phones I monitored, using systems I built." The aftermath unfolded over the following weeks with the methodical precision of a digital cascade. Brian oversaw the dismantling of Durham Developments from a specially prepared war room at FBI headquarters. Monitors tracked the collapse of what once seemed an impregnable criminal empire. 53 employees faced charges, Agent Donovan reported, updating the massive investigation board. Senior management was completely compromised, and the legitimate employees had no idea they were working for a criminal enterprise. Suddenly, Jordan burst into the room, tablet in hand. "Sir, you need to see this. We've been deep diving into Carissa's private cloud storage, and it's worse than we thought." She wasn't just playing both sides. She was running her own game, Jordan explained. The files revealed a stunning level of manipulation. Carissa had recorded every conversation, every meeting, and every illegal transaction. She had built her own insurance policy, complete with compromising material on everyone involved, including Robbie. "Look at this," Jordan said, pointing to a folder labeled Contingency. "She has evidence on every board member and every major investor, even recordings of your parents discussing money laundering operations." "Show me," Brian demanded. The audio files played his mother's voice, crisp and clear. "Of course, we're using the foundation to clean the money. It's brilliant if you question charitable donations. And once Robbie marries Carissa, we'll have complete control of both companies," his mother admitted. Agent Donovan observed, "Your mother was not just supporting the fraud. She was actively facilitating it." Tuan entered with another update. "International assets are being seized as we speak. Dubai offices raided. Accounts frozen. But there's something else." evidence of a secondary scheme. He pulled up financial records showing a complex web of transactions. Carissa was skimming funds from her own accounts, separate from Roddy's. She was planning to betray him too. Smart, Brian noted without emotion. She never intended to stay with him. The pregnancy was just another manipulation. Then Magdalena Banks entered the room, her own pregnancy now even more pronounced. DNA results just came back. Roddy isn't the father, she announced. What? Brian exclaimed, his tone void of humor. Magdalena handed over the report. She has been involved with multiple partners, all wealthy and connected to the scheme. The real father is actually a board member from one of the investment firms they defrauded. Brian laughed, a sound devoid of humor. She was hedging her bets. Multiple potential fathers meant multiple potential paydays. The revelations hit the social circuit like precision-guided missiles. Country club members who had dismissed Brian's internet security work now faced financial ruin as their retirement funds, investments, and reputations vanished into the Ponzi scheme's black hole. Margaret Cordova's charitable foundation was exposed as a money laundering operation. High society donations were nothing but smoke and mirrors. The same social connections she prized now became evidence against her. Each luncheon and charity gala was scrutinized for criminal intent. Your mother is now facing serious charges, Agent Donovan informed Brian during a late-night strategy session. The evidence shows she was orchestrating major parts of the operation, Brian replied, studying the growing evidence wall. How many victims are we looking at? Hundreds directly, thousands indirectly, Agent Donovan answered flatly. The foundation alone touched dozens of legitimate charities. Each funding source will be investigated. International co-conspirators, seeing the net closing, began making deals. Every new confession revealed more layers, more victims, more stolen millions. The real estate fraud ring that once seemed sophisticated unraveled like cheap fabric. Jordan, we found something else in the encrypted email server, Brian said. Messages between your mother and Carissa revealed plans at the Durham guest house, Jordan explained. They staged a confrontation after the engagement party to provoke you into an argument while hidden cameras recorded everything. They planned to use the footage to paint you as abusive in the divorce proceedings. Agent Donovan mused. They thought of everything, except who they were dealing with. That's always been their weakness, Brian responded coolly. They were so convinced of their own brilliance they never looked deeper. They never questioned why my security systems were so perfect for their needs. The fallout continued, reaching every corner of their carefully constructed fraud. Board members turned on each other, offering evidence in exchange for leniency. Those who had eagerly joined Robbie's scheme now couldn't distance themselves fast enough. Harold Cordova's cooperation proved invaluable. His testimony, combined with mountains of digital evidence, created an airtight case. His role as a former judge made his statements particularly damning, especially regarding Margaret's involvement. Your father is doing the right thing, Agent Donovan observed. Finally, too late, Brian replied, watching through one-way glass as Harold detailed another series of fraudulent transactions. But better late than never. 1 year later, Brian stood at his office window watching the city lights flicker on in the deepening dusk. Sentinel Cybersecurity Solutions had doubled in size, and its reputation for uncovering fraud made it the go-to firm for financial institutions worldwide. The Durham guest house, visible from his window, had been transformed into a shelter for fraud victims, its luxurious apartments now housing families rebuilding their lives. The irony was not lost on anyone. Final sentencing came through. Robbie got 20 years for fraud and money laundering with no possibility of early parole, Agent Donovan announced from his office doorway. Their relationship had evolved during the investigation, from professional respect to something more. Tell me, Brian said as he turned from the window, what happened with Robbie? Robbie got 20 years, Agent Donovan repeated. The judge was particularly impressed by the international scope of his crimes. And Carissa? Brian asked calmly. She pleaded guilty to lesser charges in exchange for her testimony. Agent Donovan explained. She gave up everything, her other relationships, her secret accounts, every detail of the operation. She'll serve 5 years plus restitution. Magdalena entered with her daughter Justice toddling beside her. The former prosecutor, now a federal judge, said, "The foundation is doing well. We've recovered over $60 million for the victims so far. Harold is volunteering at the foundation." "And my mother?" Agent Donovan replied. "She is under house arrest. Her social standing is destroyed. But she avoided prison thanks to the cooperation agreement you helped negotiate." Brian nodded, recalling the conversations that led to that agreement. Margaret's pride had finally broken when confronted with her own recorded conversations. Magdalena added, "The shelters are at full capacity. Your idea to convert the guest house was inspired. The symbolism alone has been powerful." Every Sunday, Brian still visited his mother's monitored department. Their conversations were strained but necessary, a long journey toward understanding. "Did you ever ask, was it worth it? Destroying everything we built?" She asked one day. "You destroyed it, Mother." "I just exposed the truth," Brian corrected her. The foundation they established continued to grow, a testament to the idea that justice can take many forms. Some take the shape of handcuffs, others as lines of code or financial regulations. "We found more victims," Agent Donovan reported during a late-night strategy session, "and the international connections run deeper than we thought." "Then we keep digging," Brian replied. "That's what we do now." The truth that Robbie and Carissa never grasped was simple. In the digital age, there are no perfect crimes, only perfect evidence. Their dismissal of internet security was their undoing. Sometimes the best revenge is letting people destroy themselves while you simply watch the system work. In the end, as Brian watched his company grow and his new family flourish, he realized their greatest mistake wasn't the fraud or the betrayal. It was underestimating the power of a man who knew that in the modern world, information is the ultimate weapon. And he had mastered its use. Epilogue. A decade later, 10 years had passed since Durham developments crumbled, yet its ripples still echoed through everyone's life. Brian Cordova stood at the window of his expanded corporate headquarters, now occupying 3 floors of downtown's most prestigious building. Sentinel Cybersecurity Solutions had become a global powerhouse, specializing in uncovering financial fraud that others couldn't or wouldn't detect. "Another one down," Erica announced as she entered his office with a tablet displaying news headlines. Their marriage 5 years ago had merged not just their lives but their missions. Carissa's latest appeal was rejected. Life had not been kind to the former Mrs. Cordova. After serving her initial 5-year sentence, she violated parole by attempting another small-scale fraud. The judge, coincidentally, showed no mercy. Carissa now faced another 15 years. Her designer clothes were replaced by prison orange, and her once proud bearing was broken by the way of consequences. "How is she handling it?" Brian asked, more curious than concerned. "Not well," Erica replied. "Prison reports say she appears to have aged 20 years in just a few years. Luxury spa treatments aren't available behind bars." Erica set down the tablet. She even tried writing a tell-all book, but no publisher would touch it. Her reputation preceded her. The child she had used as a pawn in her schemes was adopted by its real father's family after DNA tests revealed the truth. They moved overseas, ensuring Carissa could never use the child for manipulation again. Robbie Durham's fate was even harsher. 10 years into his 20-year sentence, he had transformed from a charismatic fraudster into a bitter, gray-haired shell. His attempts to run schemes from inside prison backfired, earning him additional time and isolation. "Durham requested another meeting with you," Jordan reported during the daily security briefing. The former analyst now ran Sentinel's fraud prevention division. "He claims he has information about other conspirators." "Same lie, different day," Brian dismissed. He had burned his last chance 5 years ago, when he tried implicating innocent people to reduce his sentence. The Durham name became synonymous with fraud. Business schools used the case as a cautionary tale, teaching future executives about the dangers of unchecked greed and the impossibility of hiding financial crimes in the digital age. Margaret Cordova's transformation was perhaps the most surprising. After her house arrest ended, she experienced what she called an awakening. Now she lived in a modest apartment, volunteering full-time at the Victim Support Center housed in the former Durham guest house. Your Mother's program is showing remarkable results, Magdalena noted during a foundation board meeting, as her daughter Justice, now 12, took notes. The victims she counsels have the highest recovery rate of any group. The woman who once prized social status now found purpose in helping those harmed by similar attitudes. Her relationship with Brian slowly healed, built on hard truths and earned trust. Harold Cordova passed away 2 years earlier, but not before seeing the foundation he helped establish assist thousands of fraud victims. Dad would be proud, Brian remarked during a foundation meeting. The prevention programs are working. We've stopped 12 major fraud attempts this year alone. The foundation had grown beyond anyone's expectations, with offices in 15 countries. They recovered over $500 million for victims, but more importantly, they changed the way the financial industry approached security. Tuan Monroe, still heading security at Sentinel, developed cutting-edge fraud detection algorithms that became industry standard. Your father's testimony helped us understand how these schemes exploit trust, he explained during a training session. Now we can spot the patterns before they grow. The public-private partnership between Sentinel and the FBI's Financial Crimes Division became a model of collaboration. Remember when they called it Internet security nonsense? Erica smiled during a joint task force briefing. Now every major financial institution uses our systems. Magdalena's judicial career soared. Her experience with the Durham case made her the foremost authority on financial crime sentencing. Her reforms were adopted nationwide, creating a more effective framework for prosecuting white-collar criminals. At a family dinner, Justice asked about the case again. Magdalena mentioned, "I'm writing a paper on it for my law class." "What did you tell her?" Brian asked his goddaughter. "That sometimes the worst criminals are those in suits carrying briefcases," she replied with wisdom beyond her years. "And that Uncle Brian taught us how to catch them." The Durham guest house had become a symbol of transformation. The luxury apartments that once hosted illicit meetings now housed a comprehensive support center for fraud victims. Its transformation mirrored the broader changes in society's approach to financial crime. "We had another success story today," Margaret reported during a weekly call with Brian. "A family that lost everything to a scheme similar to Durham's has been rebuilt. They're whole again." The country club crowd that once dismissed Brian was replaced by a new generation of business leaders who valued integrity over appearances. The annual Fraud Prevention Conference, held in the same ballroom where Durham developments fell, now attracted global leaders in finance and technology. Carissa's former sister, who once enabled her schemes, now worked with the Foundation's outreach program, using her experience to help identify potential victims before they were ensnared in fraud. After a Foundation event, Erica mentioned, "Someone asked if Carissa has shown any remorse." "Has she?" Brian replied coolly. "Only in fleeting moments. Some people never learn." International aspects of the case led to strengthened financial regulations worldwide. The same banks that once facilitated Durham schemes now used Sentinel systems to prevent fraud. Jordan's team expanded to include former law enforcement and intelligence analysts. "We're not just catching criminals anymore," he explained during a strategy session. "We're changing how people think about financial security." The Foundation's latest initiative focused on education, teaching students about financial responsibility and due diligence. They even named a program in honor of the case, a Herald Court for Financial Integrity, ensuring Brian's redemption story would continue to inspire others. As Brian watched another sunset from his office window, he reflected on the decade of change. The skyline had evolved, but one lesson remained. In the digital age, truth eventually surfaces, and karma arrives wearing handcuffs and carrying audit reports. "Ready to head home?" Erica asked, as their adopted children waited. Almost, Brian replied, checking one last alert on his system. Another potential scheme identified. Should we wait until morning? Erica asked. What would your father say? That justice doesn't take vacations, Brian smiled, already typing commands to initiate surveillance. But it does work better after a good night's sleep. As they left the office, Justice's question from years ago echoed in Brian's mind. Uncle Brian, why do people do bad things? He answered quietly, watching the sun set over the city. Because they think they won't get caught. But they're wrong. They always do. In that moment, Brian knew every betrayal, every lie, every manipulation had led to this purpose greater than revenge, a mission beyond justice. Somewhere in a federal prison cell, Carissa and Roddy had plenty of time to reflect. Their dismissal of modern security had been their undoing, in a world where truth flows like digital rivers and justice peaks in ones and zeros. The bad guys always lose. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.